Good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to worship at Countryside Church. My name is Dan Yokas. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a member of your board of trustees. We are an intentionally inclusive congregation. We affirm the individual journey. We covenant on our shared values and principles. We honor our differences, and we celebrate diversity. All are welcome. Please read the blue insert to your order of worship and the weekly email updates for news of all of our activities and events. We share some brief announcements as an outward symbol that our work is worship in action. Please join us in Atherton Hall today after worship for our ministry fair. We will have representatives from a variety of interest areas and activity groups here at Countryside who will tell you more about all of the groups and programs that are open to members and guests. If you're looking for a new way to meet people and to get involved in activities that are of interest to you, this is an excellent way to make those connections and to pursue those passions that are of greatest interest to you. We hope to see you there after service. The Chicago Area UU Council will be holding its in-person and online winter conference next Saturday, January 28th, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. right here at Countryside Church. The conference keynote presentation is entitled Finding Our Center, a journey to the central values that the Article 2 Study Commission have presented for our consideration. All UUs are invited to an important day of learning, sharing, and fellowship. Speakers will talk about the work of the Article 2 Study Commission, the vision and rationale behind the proposed Article 2 changes, and how to encourage thoughtful and informed discussion within our own congregations. Attendees of the winter conference can expect a rich and rewarding experience, regardless of their level of knowledge. A special welcome is extended to any UU high school students who would like to attend and bring their own curiosity and perspective to the larger discussion. Details and registration can be found at uuchicagoarea.org, or I see standing in the back of the sanctuary waving his hands is Mike Gilley. Mike will be involved in that program and will be happy to answer any questions you have. Question: have you subscribed to your YouTube channel? Find the link on this week's CCUU update under the Listen to the Last Sunday's worship service. There's also slips of paper in the narthex with the link that you can connect to our YouTube page. The more subscriptions we get, it's better because it's then easier for CCU members and others to search for services that they've missed and would like to share. And just a reminder, Cook County's current transmission risk level is medium. So when you are singing, the wearing of a mask is required. Otherwise, masks are optional at any indoor events at this time. Newcomers, visitors, friends, and members are welcome to all events. If you are new to Countryside, please stop to meet the greeters at the kinship table just inside Atherton Hall, across from the sanctuary this morning after the service. We would love to get to know more about you and to answer any questions that you might have about Countryside Church. If you are not yet on our mailing list, please fill out a yellow newcomer card or sign up on the homepage of our website. Again, welcome. We're glad that you decided to spend this Sunday morning with us.
Good morning. My name is Karen Narani. My pronouns are she and her. I have been a member of Countryside for over 30 years and have tried to share my abilities and talents over that time, including serving on the board, but much greater gift has been the one that Countryside has given my family and me. We come from multiple cultures and multiple spiritual roots, and this has been a place where my children were able to grow, questioning safely and feeling at home. And the most important thing I wanted to say was the women compose, all the women composers today, all the composers are women, and they were barrier breakers. They were women who did not allow the expectations or the limitations that were placed on women in their time to stop them following their passions, breaking barriers, and leading the way for others.
Good morning on this beautiful day. I am the Reverend Denise Colley. My pronouns are she and her. As Unitarian Universalists, we have affirmed knowledge of gender and sexuality for so long. We started About Your Sexuality, called AYS, in the 1970s. And later, in 1999, that program became Our Whole Lives, OWL. AYS and OWL teach our youth, and now there's even an adult and there's a senior edition, about body autonomy, values-based decision-making, sexuality, and relationships. And throughout the program, participants are encouraged to explore and learn to articulate their own values such as self-worth, justice, and inclusivity. Our religious ancestors have been affirming reproductive rights since before I was born. I believe having a child is a moral decision, and raising a child and considering the access that human will have to adequate health care, education, and housing, those are huge moral decisions that are rarely discussed. My friend Luis back there has a couple pictures of how we actually got to discuss a few of those this week in this morning's Chicago Tribune. I was interviewed, and it talks about our church on the front page today. They spent a couple hours with me, and then they sent a photographer out here. It was very generous, and I think it was a very fair interview. They highlight other faiths and their views. So it's wonderful to get something different in the paper on this anniversary of Roe versus Wade. It's not as big of a celebration as I had hoped for the 50th anniversary. And so we're going to try to bring you a snippet of how complex all these issues are. And I ask you throughout the service, as you hear stories that might surprise you, or maybe you already know, ask yourself, what would love do here? There is no doubt that a loved child is a gift, and a welcomed pregnancy is a blessing. Yet, not every pregnancy is welcome. And do not confuse unplanned or unintended with unwelcome. I don't think that's true either. As a minister, I know a child being raised by people without access to good housing and educational opportunities and health care. For me, that's a far bigger ethical issue than when cells divide and start to pulse. As a Unitarian Universalist, I trust people. I trust you. I trust me to make moral decisions that are best for ourselves. I believe in you.
Good morning. I'm Mari Van Meter. I am representing the Worship Council this morning, and my pronouns are she, her. For our chalice lighting this morning, it's adapted from Body Blessing by Reverend Lisa Bovey Kimber. Please read along, and if you're joining us at home, please feel free to light your chalice or candle. You may also enter into the chat on Zoom where you're lighting your candle from, since such as this chalice is being lit in Arlington Heights today. I invite you to read with me. We light this chalice and let the light bless your working hands. May your hands be gentle and strong. May you use them to carry light into the darkness and rest to the weary. May your hands always find the place of greatest need, beginning with your own, and may the Creator of all things hold you in the palm of her hand wherever you go.
And now please join me in singing hymn 1053, How Could Anyone? And remember that if you are singing, please wear a mask.
Please join me in reading our congregational covenant. We unite to strengthen the bonds of kinship among all persons, to promote human dignity, and to increase reverence for life's creating, sustaining, and transforming power through worship, study, and service. You get me for a long time today. I get to do the message for all ages. Today I'm going to be reading Can I Give You a Squish by Emily Nelson. Our story today, Can I Give You a Squish by Emily Nelson. Kai gave his mama a big squish. I love squishes, he said. The rest of the morning, Kai gave out squishes. He squelched some kelp, he squashed a rock, and he scrunched some buried treasure. He even gave his friends a big group squish. Then Kai saw a little pufferfish he wanted to squish. And the pufferfish saw Kai. Squish! Suddenly the fish popped up like a water balloon, which is what pufferfish do when they are scared or upset. I do not like to be squished, said the fish. Kai felt terrible. All he had wanted to do was give a friendly squish, but it had gone terribly wrong. The fish did not like the squish at all. Maybe there's something else you can give besides a squish to show that you want to be friends, said the crab. But what? The friends thought, and they considered, and they pondered, until at last it came to them. A fin bump. The pufferfish was still hiding when Kai swam up. Excuse me, said Kai, I see you don't like squishes. Would you like a fin bump instead? The fish became calm. I like getting fin bumps, said the fish. And I like giving them, said Kai. What about you guys? What do you like? I like to do tail claps, said the dolphin. Me too, said Kai. I like tentacle shakes, said the octopus. So Kai gave him one. Does anybody want a claw pinch? asked the crab. Maybe just a little one, said the octopus. That's when Kai realized every fish likes his own kind of squish. Kai went to find his mama to show her what he had learned. He gave her a fin bump, and a tail clap, and a tentacle shake, and even a claw pinch. Thanks, Bubble, but I think I'd rather have a squish. Okay, Mama. And Kai gave his mama a great big squish.
I have a special treat today with a historic look at reproductive care right in this community. Welcome, Barry Burr.
I'm Gary Burr. My pronouns are she and her. I've been a member here for over 17 years. Perhaps you remember the story of Dr. George Tiller. He was a Wichita, Kansas abortion clinic doctor. Perhaps you remember the story of George Tiller. Dr. George Tiller, he ran a Wichita, Kansas abortion clinic. I greatly admired him. I was devastated when he was fatally shot in the head while serving as an usher at his Lutheran church in Wichita in 2009. Ironically, when Kansas voted overwhelmingly to keep abortion legal in their state last year, one of the polling places they used was Dr. Tiller's church. This struck close to my heart because I ran Crossroads Family Planning Clinic in Palatine and Family Planning and Abortion Facility in Elgin. From 1972 to 1985, I ran the Palatine Family Planning Clinic. From 1985 to 1995, I ran our Elgin Clinic. Both of the clinics were called Crossroads Clinic. Today is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, the 1973 case legalizing abortion. Before that, the clinic could only refer patients to 2 states when they requested abortion referrals, New York and California. When Reagan came into office, he prevented any clinic from making a referral for abortion. We decided to add the abortion services to our Elgin clinic. Consider how clinics across the country were broken into, staff was threatened, doctors were murdered. To address that, we installed bulletproof glass across the front of the building, which cost $3,000. It was a rented facility, a buzzer system so we could identify and buzz our patients in. It was a huge amount of money back then. We had an unarmed security guard at the back door on abortion days. At one point, the post office refused to deliver the mail for over a week. I had to go through Springfield to finally get the mail delivered. At one point, the ATF came to the clinic because we had a bomb threat. They brought their bomb-sniffing dogs and circled the building. Our staff refused to evacuate. The event made the front page of the Elgin paper with my picture on it. Once I heard our staff crying and screaming from the back of the building, back door. I rushed to the back door. I saw the staff trying to hold the door shut. I could see that there was a station wagon in the parking lot and people were getting out of the station wagon, men carrying baseball bats and running up toward the door. One man with a bat had already gotten inside. He was the only one to get inside because they were successful in keeping the door shut. Without his backup team, this man lost his nerve to destroy our property. Instead, he chained himself to the back door, refusing to leave. Police were called and told me that instead of cutting the man loose, they had another plan. He would unlock himself in a few hours when he had to use the bathroom. Which is exactly what happened. Many of our patients were young women in their teens who could not tell their parents they were pregnant. I'll never forget seeing women so poor they were shoeless. I recall one woman showing me the scar from a bullet wound on her arm where her boyfriend had shot her. She was now pregnant. I will never forget one woman who was raped after leaving a bar and became pregnant from the assault. She knew who had violated her and reported him to the police. The rapist was a friend of the police officer and he was never charged. She had so much rage and trauma from the assault, and the man never being punished, that one day when she saw him leaving a store, she ran him over in the parking lot with her car. She never knew what happened to him after that. I still think about her. The doctor that we employed to do abortions did not want any picketers to know what car he drove, so I would drive to his house and pick him up. The staff would always meet him as he got close to the clinic, and they'd run out and form a human shield around him to protect him from the picketers who were menacing him and shouting at him. Back then, protesters were allowed to come close to us and get in our faces. Thankfully, things got much better after President Clinton imposed a 20-foot distance law that picketers had to maintain from staff. I was threatened by a man whose girlfriend had received an abortion from the clinic. We called the police, and they listened in on his calls to me and recorded them. They told me they knew who he was and that he was heavily armed. I went to court and got an order of protection. He was not allowed to call or come near the clinic for a year. I'll never forget watching him leave the court, standing in front of the judge as I was ordered my order of protection. He turned to the judge, gave a Nazi salute, clicked his heels, turned and left the courtroom. Later, I was at the local post office, getting out of my car, and I saw him coming down the steps of the post office. Now he knew my name, where I worked, and the car I drove. 1 year later, I heard a commotion at the front desk and ran out to see the same man threatening my staff. Using super strength, I threw him out. Which I don't remember, but that's what the staff told me I did. While this violence was happening at our Elgin clinic, the Palatine Clinic was requesting $5,000 in revenue sharing money from Palatine Township to provide birth control to those who could not afford it. The Catholic Church heard about it, and they got their parishioners to sign a petition to have the clinic closed. The first township meeting was canceled due to a crowd. 500 people showed up. So they moved to a local school where there was more room. Our clinic staff sat in the front row. We were surrounded by angry parents. 2 television stations showed up to record the event. Some of our patients got up and spoke out about their positive experience that they'd had at our clinic. I was really surprised that they were able to stand up and speak about their experiences, because most of them were very scared to have their parents find out that they were using birth control. One of the local Catholic priests also got up and he spoke out against us. In rebuttal, our Unitarian minister at the time, Reverend Rupert Lovely, got up and he talked about the benefit to the community that we have provided. We got the money. Reverend Lovely would close every sermon with the following benediction, which is so relevant in these turbulent times. And now may the truth that makes us free, and the hope that never dies, and the love that casts out fear, lead us forward together until the day's spring breaks and the shadows flee away. Amen.
For our second reading, we're going to set the stage through some videos of what's happening here in Illinois and our surrounding area. Illinois is now known as an island for reproductive justice and access in the Midwest. And I want to start you with a video clip about our neighbors to the north where I live in Wisconsin.
Abortion access in Wisconsin is up in the air, and now another state is stepping in.
And so are groups who oppose abortion. Brett Vickery shows us the border battle over pregnancy.
We're referring all of our abortion patients out of state for care.
This is the new reality for Planned Parenthood Wisconsin. There's a court battle over whether the state's 1849 ban is enforceable after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. In the meantime, Wisconsin clinics are suspending abortion services. Enter Illinois.
We were prepared to give Wisconsin patients the care they needed.
There's a new partnership between Planned Parenthood Wisconsin and Planned Parenthood Illinois. welcoming Wisconsin women over the state line to Waukegan for abortion services. It's a 48-mile drive from Milwaukee that Wisconsin-based doctors like Dr. Allison Linton are willing to make.
Planned Parenthood believes that everyone should have the freedom and power to control their own bodies and lives. And as a provider, I am doing all that I can to achieve that vision.
With consequences that go beyond state lines.
We won't give up. Not now, not ever.
In Milwaukee, Brett Vickery, Fox 6 News.
Those are all people I worked with when I was a chaplain at Planned Parenthood, and that was the clinic I was a chaplain at. And that was the executive director of Planned Parenthood Wisconsin and the executive director of Planned Parenthood Illinois. We're also going to help you understand how, as awesome as it is that Illinois is a place where people can come, it's also very stressful to our systems in the state, and it's really limiting access to other care, and it's severely limiting access to care that people need, and I'm going to help you understand some of that. There's a brief 30-second clip here, I believe, from Dr. King.
You think about a law written in 1849. This was a time 14 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. So it really had nothing to do with modern medicine. And so as a physician, it's a very difficult law to interpret. We know if we violate it, we become a felon and could be imprisoned for 6 years.
Not only is this limiting access for people who supposedly are having elective abortions, although I'll tell you why I don't think that word is really accurate and is a bit of a misnomer in the sermon, but it's also changing how people access services if they have a miscarriage or need a D&C, and I know there's many people in this room that have dealt with all of those issues. And fellow congregant Teresa Tomczyk can't be with us today because she's at the Women's March showing up to protest and restore access to abortion. And sadly, more attacks on sexual and reproductive health are happening all over now. And everyone's worried about it. We certainly upped our security for this service and alerted the local police, and we've got people keeping watch, so we've prepared for this. And that's not fair. Anti-abortion activists and lawmakers are now weaponizing the court system and creating a hostile state where legislators strip basic rights for people accessing health care. And we're seeing all kinds of legislative lawsuits to block access to birth control, even in states where it's supposedly legal, like here. And we're seeing limited access now to life-saving cancer screenings, HIV prevention, fertility assistance, gender-affirming health care, and more. And I got emails from people in our congregation about these very issues who live here, who are dealing with the effects of that. They're also trying to take away the right to travel to get health care and trying to reverse the FDA's latest approval of safe, effective medication being mailed and trying to censor public health information. In fact, the two doctors that you saw in that video, both were required when someone came in asking for an abortion to provide information that was factually totally incorrect. They were required to give them a brochure with that. That's been going on for some time. So there's really harmful effects to abortion bans, and they stretch way beyond abortion care. And it's now harder for people to get that life-saving care for miscarriages and ectopic pregnancies and other pregnancy-related complications. And our fellow congregant Teresa's here to show us and tell us a bit about that.
Hello, I'm Teresa Boyson, and I'm here to share my story today. In my late 20s, I was told that it may be too late for me to have children. So I was shocked and absolutely over the moon when I discovered I was pregnant at 36 years old. I told everybody right away, and I was absolutely beaming with joy. My mother-in-law took me shopping for maternity clothes immediately because my birthday was just around the corner and we knew I'd need them sooner or later. 3 days after that shopping trip, my husband and I sat in the ultrasound room, excited to sneak another little peek at our perfect baby. And the ultrasound tech just very calmly said, "I'm sorry, but there's no heartbeat." I will never forget that moment. Time just froze. I just said no. And I looked at my husband, sure that he would tell me that I misunderstood. We couldn't believe it. Our child had passed. The doctor determined that this life stopped developing at 9 weeks, and I was scheduled for a D&C later that week. I cried like I've never cried before. Many years later, I'm still crying now because it still feels like yesterday. And I told myself that the ultrasound machine was broken or that it was going to be okay because this was just a terrible nightmare that I was going to wake up from. And I even scheduled the second ultrasound the day of the surgery to be absolutely sure that there was no chance that my baby was still alive. As absolutely shattered as I was, my personal freedom was never in question. In some parts of the world today, women are prosecuted for miscarriage, believing that it is entirely in their control. Several days later, I was in the hospital waiting for my surgery. I wanted it to be over, and I also didn't want it at all. I wanted to keep carrying my sleeping angel. Some people may say that this is not an abortion story because my baby stopped developing before my abortion. But here's my choice. I wasn't just sent home. I certainly wasn't in any sort of legal trouble. My healthcare advisor offered me the option of scheduling an abortion because it was the safest way to ensure my continued health and my ability to conceive and carry a child in the future. Every moment of pregnancy and childbirth is an honor, a responsibility, and a risk. I was able to make the decision for my own health, what was best for my body, what was best for my family, and what was best for me. I have that legal right, and because I have that right, I got the care that I needed. I was able to have another child, and I am a mother because I was allowed an abortion. I was not persecuted or judged. I was treated, and I physically recovered. Is this a story I want to share? No, I hate talking about this. But I'm terrified of living in a country where it's illegal for women to seek appropriate medical care. As Audre Lorde said, your silence will not protect you. So I will share my story, and I will fight to keep safe abortion legal for all women.
I apologize, Teresa. I think I grabbed your name off of your email and maybe it's your maiden name. Thanks to everyone for their bravery, even those that asked me to keep their story anonymous. Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization was a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court back in June, which the court held up that the Constitution of the United States does not confer the right to abortion. The court's decision overruled Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, giving individual states full power to regulate any aspect of abortion not protected by federal law. When the Chicago Tribune asked me how I felt about today's anniversary, my response was horrified and sad. I think we are in a climate where logic is no longer a part of many conservative arguments against abortion, healthcare, and privacy. Opponents are using chaos techniques, creating a culture of fascism. Why talk about this at church? This is not nice, Reverend Denise. I heard someone say 2 weeks ago, no politics at church. I think it's a spiritual issue. I think it's an ethical issue. Just as we talk about environment and the ozone And just as we talk about immigration and amnesty, I think these are huge ethical issues. And without jobs that are supportive of families and pay that is a living wage and benefits, without childcare and preschool and extended education expenses and affordable housing and systems of care, I really think the word choice is a misnomer. Can anyone actually be exercising choice if they don't have options? If their decisions are constricted by access to funds and luck and the ability to take time off work to go travel, or an invasion of privacy, is that really a choice? In the brand new, released this week, Article 2 Proposed Values and Covenant, the Article 2 Study Commission issued a statement that says, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, courage, and we build it all on a foundation of love. So today I aim to inspire you to take up this issue, maybe in a new way than you have before, by participating in talks and upcoming events that I'll tell you about later, and just look at it from a broader picture of privacy, or even considering how you could call, you could write, you could even help nearby states to relieve some of the pressure on Illinois being this island. When I started as a chaplain in 2017, that was the largest abortion clinic in Wisconsin, I imagined abortions happened all the time in clinics across the land. That wasn't true. There were 3 places in Wisconsin you could get an abortion. I thought abortion must take really special equipment, not found everywhere. It does not. It is the exact same procedure as when you have heard of people getting a D&C, a clearing of the uterine lining after a miscarriage. Many of you have undergone these procedures and told me about them, and some of you had miscarriages even after fertility treatments, where the tissues didn't quite form. Some of you had an abortion because you needed one, or maybe you helped someone get one. I want to give you a little picture of this. Louise has a few pictures of some of the people I served with at Planned Parenthood. You'll see, this was the goddess. She was painted on the sides of the buildings and stuff like that. We came to call her like the Planned Parenthood goddess. You'll see these are really radical looking people, right? This was the director of abortion care for Planned Parenthood Wisconsin. This is the director of patient care. She owns a little farm. She has dogs. Next. I thought of myself as like a mini Wonder Woman, right? I was gonna go in and help save the day or something. I called it Super Chaplain, right? I had a tool belt, because, you know, I'm queer. So, no, go back for a second, Louise. You know, I had tissue, I had like candy, I had little inspirational cards, I had essential oils. I was like ready at any moment. Next. You know, trying to be this, but really it wasn't quite so glamorous. I also used to draw between patients, and I would draw both the nursing and clinic staff, and sometimes I would draw patients that gave me permission. That was kind of my prayer that I did, in a way for me to reflect between people that I saw and I met. The abortion rights established by Roe v. Wade 50 years ago were stolen last June. The Supreme Court opened a huge floodgate of chaos, where dozens of states reverted to decades and even some centuries old laws. I thought abortion, before I was a chaplain, was about a woman's choice to carry a pregnancy to term. And then I thought, no, it's really a system conspiring against people with uteruses and thus limiting choices. Respect for body autonomy is a core principle of reproductive justice. As well as in our OWL curriculum, it's affirmed every few years at General Assembly. There are tons of proclamations and resolutions that people just like us have gotten together and hammered out and written and then had people vote on as delegates at GA. It's just been a part of our faith for a long, long time. CCUU member Michelle Hitchcock said, "I've been really feeling lately like the message and conversation around choice and women's agency has fallen away. I believe women ought to have the right to make medical decisions and choices about their own bodies, including pregnancy and birth. The ability to choose freely," and she really emphasized that, freely, and have a true choice, is so important. Michelle says, "As the line goes, I think abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. No woman should be coerced into either pregnancy or abortion. Choice and body autonomy for all women is critical. And when choice is removed from the conversation, we deprioritize women's agency. And that's really what women's rights are all about, agency." So much of the national talk is not about trusting people to have their own agency, which causes harm and damaged relationships. Also in those new proposed Article 2 values and covenant, it states, "We honor the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish the earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect." We trust people. I think that's really cool. We trust people. Our faith calls us to trust people. Our goal is that everyone has access to the support for what they need, like Barry demonstrated and talked to us about. Banning abortion does not stop people from needing abortions. Lives are put at risk when lawmakers restrict care. The chaos and confusion and devastation we've seen over the past 6 months is exactly the environment anti-abortion rights people want to have and have been working to get for decades. Now, we may feel relieved knowing that Illinois still has legal safe options. I certainly do. But one of our congregants shared with me how her health care is now part of the chaotic mess created by the loss of Roe. She goes to Planned Parenthood to get medicine injections every 3 months. And due to the flood of people coming in to Illinois from other states, she now scrambles to get an appointment even if she tries to make it the day she leaves. They now have to limit the amount of time ahead you can schedule an appointment for to only 2 months. She needs a shot every 3 months. You can imagine this is complicated. The appointments are far more limited. So even though the law, quote, didn't affect us, it majorly affects us. I was listening on my way in on the radio, someone else in Southern Illinois talking about how they moved their clinic from Tennessee to Southern Illinois. Like the whole thing, they moved, right? And they used to offer a whole spectrum of care for all different people. And now the only care they can offer is abortion because they are so busy and they've never had so many people working and the clinic open so many hours. Lack of access to health insurance and health care plays a role in who can have an abortion too, as does racism and discrimination. So again, is it really a choice if those are all coming into play? Consider who has the most access to affordable education and jobs and all the things I keep talking about. For me, this looks at this whole thing systematically. We have to systematically look at how anti-racist measures need to be infused into everything we do. It's all part of a system. Ponder too that abortion rates have been steadily decreasing over the past 2 decades, which directly correlates to access to contraception. So what else is being limited? Contraception. All right? Countries that have living wages and access to full medical care or socialized medicine and affordable health care and education Do you know they not only have very low abortion rates, they also have very low adoption rates? All of those are systems that create true choice and options for people to do what's truly best for them. One thing I emphasized over and over in the interview, if you read it in the Tribune, was that I'm not qualified to comprehend the myriad of situations that cause someone to need an abortion. That became abundantly clear to me when I started working at that clinic. I thought I knew so much and I was so educated, and I didn't get it. I really didn't get it. One doctor I'm familiar with closed his clinic in Milwaukee and opened one in Rockford. My own personal physician is flying on weekends to Florida to perform abortions and remain certified to give care to those in need. Oh, and you know those states that don't allow abortions, right? That also means their medical schools cannot be certified. So they can't have board certified physicians coming out of them anymore if they don't offer the full range of women's health care for their OBGYNs that they need. I used to think that abortion procedures must take very specialized training. If you've ever watched that movie about the south side of Chicago, The Janes, you'll learn how quickly they learned how to do abortions. Nurses could do abortions if the state allowed it. In some states, they do. Everything I thought I knew about abortion when I was a chaplain, I realized I was all wrong. I imagined I would bring people juice and sit with them as they weighed their options. That really didn't happen. I became certified in all options pregnancy counseling. Whatever it is you wanted to explore, I have a certification to help sit with you as you go through that process. But almost everyone I've ever talked to really didn't feel like they had an option. I imagined that everyone whose life was threatened by their pregnancy would be taken care of in the hospital too, right? We hear all about that. It'll be legal if they need it, right? If they really need it. Ha! I thought abortion clinics were for people who had options, but for whatever reason didn't want to carry out a viable pregnancy. Wrong again. That situation has also become worse. One day I was asked to talk to a woman I'll call Serena. She had really long hair, and she was raised Catholic, and she was going to law school, and she had a very unusual arthritic disease. She was in her early 20s, and she had been prescribed methotrexate. No one told her to take a pregnancy test before starting the medication. She was told to not get pregnant while on it. So she took the medication and later on learned she was pregnant, and the pregnancy must have formed just before starting the medicine. Her blood pressure went out of control and she was at risk for stroke. Bleeding increased and she went to the nearest hospital, that was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and they told her she needed to have an abortion immediately to save her life. Do you think they did it? No. To make matters worse, her ultrasound showed that the cells were not growing properly and that the cells had like a cranial abnormality and limb defects. And on the screen, it looked like those cells were maybe having a seizure in utero. They told her to get in her car and drive to Planned Parenthood 3 hours away. Now, she had to get a hotel room and stay the night. And at Planned Parenthood, she learned she could not have an abortion for 3 days because at that time there was a waiting period in Wisconsin. Now they can't have one at all, right? And so she went to the hotel, and if she wanted to come to Illinois, she'd have to drive another 90 miles from where she was at the time. So see, even when someone's life is in danger, they get told to get in their car and go elsewhere. The law forces all these situations. If a hospital wouldn't perform an abortion for a person like Serena when Roe was legal, what do you think happens now? Hospitals feel the harassment and the legal red tape from reporting procedures even when medically necessary, and they purposely try to keep those numbers very, very low. They don't want to have to go through proving what it means for a life to be at stake. Serena was most angry about not being told to take a pregnancy test, and she was further enraged that the hospital did not want an abortion on their records and sent her away, putting her life at risk. I shook holding on to the wheel of my car, she told me. I had to stop and puke 3 times to get here. And now I'm in some hotel, and I'm sick, and I'm shaking for days because I have to wait. And I have been praying that I would die, she told me. My blood pressure got so bad last night that I thought my head would explode, and I went to the hospital, to the emergency room. So a second hospital, right? They gave me some pills for my blood pressure and told me to get an abortion as soon as possible. Think of Serena when you hear that abortion will still be allowed when a mother's life is at risk. No, that is not an unusual story. I heard versions of that story over and over and over. I have a friend who spent most of his career working as a chaplain at Planned Parenthood in Washington, Alaska, Hawaii, and I think Oregon. One of the Planned Parenthood clinics was connected to the hospital via a tunnel underground. If a woman needed an abortion at the hospital, they would wheel her out of the hospital through the tunnel over to Planned Parenthood. She would get an abortion, and then they would wheel her back to the hospital. Maybe you read today in the Tribune about one of the couples I helped, a Hindi couple that I cared for. The mother I'll call Sita. She was losing her sight from preeclampsia, and her blood pressure was skyrocketing. She too was sent from her OBGYN's office, immediately told to get an abortion or go blind and risk a stroke. I held her hand during the abortion, and she called out for God. I said, God is with you. Afterwards, Sita asked me to see the remains of her conception, and I had the medical assistant place it in a bowl. We covered it with a cloth. She begged for her husband to join her. I held her hand gently, and they sat side by side on the exam chair. Sita was crying and wailing, and I lifted the cloth, and they looked at this tiny blob of egg-like cells. Not much different than a robin's egg that you've seen fall out of a nest. Like every single person that wanted to see their remains of conception, she immediately stopped crying. See, everyone's been taught to imagine that I will be showing them a miniature baby, and that is not the case. In fact, I was so happy I saw the New York Times ran an article this morning. I didn't get to read the whole thing yet, but it said early pregnancy does not at all look like what you think it does. And Barry's nodding her head. Nothing like that. All those people passing out plastic little babies, that is a bunch of malarkey. It is a collection of cells, sometimes more formed, certainly, sometimes not. The skin is not formed. It is a gelatinous covering of beginnings. Sita asked to touch it, and I gave her and her husband purple medical gloves, and they stroked this tiny nickel-sized spear. He picked it up and held it in his palm and asked, could we donate these cells to another family that could carry a child? We can't use it right now, but maybe someone else could, he said to me. And I explained it just didn't work that way, and those were the very cells that were harming Sita. She shook her head, and she clasped her hands, and she said, thank you, God, for giving me this care here. In a neighborhood not far from here, I was asked to chaplain a UU youth, a young transgender man who found himself pregnant after a sexual assault in downtown Chicago. He worried about going off of his transgender hormone-affirming medications, and he worried about how to avoid harm to the fetus. He loved children, but he knew he didn't have the means to raise a child, and he worried that his compromised mental state was such that he would harm himself if forced to carry out the pregnancy. He had been an RE teacher in 2 of our congregations. I talked with him several times. I still think about him. Over and over, I would hear people say, thank you. Thank you, Allah. Thank you, God. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, Goddess, for giving me this care. They were all complex situations. So focus on whether fertilized cells should be called life or not, for me, distracts us from a moral world to raise our children in. Making a woman or a person with a uterus nothing more than a vessel robs the pregnant person of the autonomy or free will over their own destiny. Having a child and raising it is a moral issue that we trust people to make. And anyone facing moral decisions deserves support and love and kindness. If someone has no value, if a woman has no value, then whether she wants to be a parent has no resonance. And that's unacceptable. It is an even violent way to approach the interconnected web. So again, long ago I thought abortion was about choice. And then I saw it as a system conspiring against people with uteruses and legislating them to be incubators. And the more I look at it, the more I see it as a holy conversation between a person and their circumstances and their beliefs. Whether it is a choice or not is a holy question with more variables than I am willing or able to decide for anyone else. I can support and walk people through that and accompany them, but abortion is complex. Child rearing is complex. My aim is to love people into finding their own voice, their own way, and for me, it's all about siding with love. I ask all of you to side with love.
Our congregation is entirely self-governed by the democratic process. One of the privileges of our free church tradition is to provide all of the financial support for our many ministries, all of our many ministries among ourselves. Generosity, therefore, is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and our institutional well-being. You are now invited to participate in the blessing of giving as the ushers come among you to accept the gifts from this congregation. And if this is your first time with us, please let the plate pass you by. Your presence today is gift enough. For those of you at home, how to donate is outlined on your screen. Please give generously.
I forgot to show you, Luis, do you have the pictures? I got my hands hennaed with 1973. Sometimes I do that for special sermons. I felt I needed the power, the help to get through this one, so.
All of us are individuals can do something to support the movement to protect access to safe abortions and reproductive care. Do it for privacy rights too. One event will be Reverend Karen Mooney will join us on Saturday, February 11th from 10 to 12:30 in Atherton Hall for the loss of women's rights and what Illinois congregations can do about it. We may want to consider becoming a sacred congregation and be designated as helpers in this process. Also, the UUA Uplift Action Department has a 3-part class on what churches can do online. We will include both of those in the newsletter this week.
I close with these words. First, listen. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for learning about those whose lives are so different from yours, and then passionately speak for justice on behalf of all, that all may live in health, wholeness, and love. And as you go through blessings on this journey, some of you have signs, side with love, my friends. Side with love. Yeah, amen. Thank you all.